Hello again, Sanu. Thank you for being here. And could you, first of all, do I have your permission, as we talked about before, do I have your permission to record this and then share it on social media in whole and in part? Now, I'm going to qualify the in part. It just means I break up all the questions into individual videos so that I can
Mhm.
put them on things like LinkedIn and Facebook eventually, but it will start out on YouTube as individual videos and one large interview. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, perfectly. All right, Tim. And first of all, thank you very much for giving an opportunity to uh, to explain the virtues of being a leadership uh, position which I hold, and I'm very eager and excited to hear about the questions.
Great. So then the first one is, as
Mhm.
was the last time we spoke, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
My name is Dr. Sanu Jacob, and currently I am working as the Director of Food Safety and Standard Authority of India, popularly known as FSSAI. I work in one of their laboratory, National Food Laboratory, which is located in Chennai. This Food Safety and Standard Authority of India comes under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and
Mhm.
I am working in this organization for the past 5 years. It's going to be 5 years in September. Prior to that, I worked in another Government of India organization as Joint Director, popularly known as Export Inspection Council or EIC. I was heading one of their agency, I would say the biggest agency in Mumbai, Maharashtra, towards the western region, handling three states, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Goa. Prior to that, I was an academician. I worked in various academic institutes and universities in India, particularly in Kerala. And prior to that, I was an agricultural researcher, having worked in India, Israel, Italy, France, Canada, and as a visiting scientist in Belgium and in Holland, and also did some part of my training pertaining to my qualification in Ghana. So that's in nutshell about me.
Great. So I'd like to do the same, and I'm not sure how relevant this is to the audience, but I'm interested because we talked about this last time, and that is, can you please tell us, because I know that you're, like you said, you're an academic and you have multiple postdocs. Can you tell us a little bit about each postdoc? So ideally at a level that people will understand. I'll summarize it again if you prefer, but can you please tell us about your postdocs?
Definitely. I'll start with my post graduate, which was in horticulture sciences, where my specialization was in fruit science. So in that domain, I was focused on post-harvest technology, which I gained the experience while working at the Central Institute for Subtropical Horticulture, CISH, Lucknow in India. That was way back in 2001, soon after I completed my postgraduate studies in Orissa, India. Once the post-harvest management deals with the shelf life enhancement of fruit, both in terms of quality and in terms of safety. Safety in terms of not the fruits not getting spoiled, or what are the ways where we can enhance through proper storage techniques. So in that way, I got an opportunity to work in Israel with a lead scientist as part of my pre-doc, and which was mainly focused on many subtropical fruits like avocado, lychee, banana. And that time I was offered a doctorate by the Italian government, and I won a fellowship in the non-EU category, which was something prestigious. And my work was related to non-destructive assessment of fruits and vegetable while they are on chain. So we basically used a spectroscopic method to internally determine whether we can assess the maturity, and we linked it with its quality, like the sugar content and the acid content. and
Mhm.
and based on a mathematical algorithm or a equation or a model, we were able to predict the quality of fruit at the time of their harvest, and accordingly we could segregate or give a recommendation which fruit can go to which market based on the distance. Well, my first postdoc basically was on this aspect, because as soon as I finished my PhD, the French people, they were very interested, so they offered me a position before my PhD tenure was about to end. And that's how I moved to France in 2007. And again, it was more or less related to my PhD work, basically on Apple, on spatially resolved reflectance spectroscopy. Again, it deals with the assessment of fruits through spectroscopic techniques, and linking it with its quality, like sugar and acid contents.
Mhm.
And the second postdoc was in Canada, where I went to Truro. I worked in the Nova Scotia Agriculture College. There was a problem with the Christmas tree needle drop, and the needles, soon after the trees are harvested or were harvested, there was a challenge of the needle drop, and it was a big challenge to the Christmas tree growers association of sending it to other markets like US or Europe because of this. So as a post-harvest physiology gist, since I worked in fruit, I was my I was hired for a postdoc position, and I went. At that time, I was working in Kerala in an engineering institution. So I took sabbatical and I moved to Canada, and I was more working on the post-harvest physiology of understanding the needle drop, including the biological pathways uh, through which we can try to trigger or try to use some means to cut that pathway of the needle drop, basically focusing on ethylene biosynthesis and pinene, which is very predominant uh, terpene terpenoid in balsam Christmas trees. So that was my second postdoc about, and the third postdoc was again in Italy. Of course, I worked remotely because they wanted to prepare a document on the mango post-harvest storage, and for that I was associated, and I worked for close to a year in that project before getting back to my old job of teaching. So this were in nutshell about all the three postdocs. Of course, different crops, but the I would say the idea or the theme was more towards the post-harvest management.
Right. Okay. So just as last time we spoke, I'm gonna try to summarize that in simple ways, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I want to keep this, or at least grab the technical as well as I understand it, and then simplify it. So the first one was about what fruit was what food was the first one?
Well, in the postdoc, are you talking about the postdoc
Yeah,
or
the storage,
the
the
storage,
storage of food.
all kind of subtropical fruits? I would
Okay.
say, the Lucknow work was mainly focusing on mango and guava, while
Mhm.
the Israel work was on avocado, lychee, sometimes banana,
Right.
and also dates. not really, but it was just kind of a training program.
Hmm.
The third project in Italy was more towards nectarine and peaches, while the
Hmm.
French one was on apples, and the
Right.
Canadian one was on Christmas trees.
Right. So in the case of all of those, they were all basically the the preservation and storage to increase shelf life. Because I guess even needle drop, even though that's, people aren't eating Christmas trees, it is still about essentially extending the effective shelf life before the needles fall off. Is that correct?
Exactly, exactly. Though
Okay.
the people are not eating Christmas tree, but that's a significant factor since the trees are harvested somewhere in the autumn in October,
Hmm.
and how best for the export market purpose, uh, it was a big challenge for the Canadian Christmas tree growers. While
Right.
for the home purpose, it shouldn't be a problem if you just cut at the advent of the Christmas season somewhere in the first week of December, that should hold good. But only for the export market, it was a big challenge. And
Right.
further, many of the people or the citizens were going for the artificial trees, you know. So this was also a threat to the Christmas Tree Growers Association because they wanted to, upkeep that Canadian tradition of
Hmm.
keeping the balsam Christmas tree because you get the essence of Christmas with the terpenes that is being evolved by the Christmas tree when they're
Yeah,
kept on the plant.
they unlike the other Christmas trees until, and they may do this, but until they actually start putting artificial aromatics into the trees or on the coating plastic trees with that, yeah, it smells like Christmas. It doesn't just look like Christmas.
Exact
So I want to do a quick summary of the you were talking about the spectroscopy, yeah?
spectroscopy.
Yeah. So spectroscopy, for those of you who aren't science geeks, I'm enough of one to know essentially that's talking about the color of light and you would shine some kind of light onto the fruit or through the fruit and thereby be able to assess its maturity and its sugar content without actually taking a sample. That's the non-destructive. So you were using light to be able to measure the sweetness and maturity of the fruit. Is that correct?
Exactly. Of course, it is a photon or the laser light which is sent at a particular wavelength. Say,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, if we want to assess the maturity of the fruit, so we assume that the fruit will be green in color, particularly for the fruits which are having a red blush on their skin, like
Mm-hmm.
peaches, apples. So at the very young stage, the red blush, appears on the fruit skin surface. So a laser light or a pulse is injected non-destructively, and the photons from another side is captured back to see how much it is absorbed. So if there
Right.
is more of chlorophyll inside the fruit, obviously at that particular wavelength, there is more absorption, which indicates that the fruit is still immature or yet to be mature.
Right. So
So
you're
based on that,
shining your Mhm.
yeah,
So you're shining a red laser, a red spectrum laser through the fruit, and because chlorophyll is green, it absorbs more of the light that's transmitted through the fruit, and therefore it indicates a lack of maturity, a lack of sweetness compared to one that actually allows transmission of more red light.
exactly. I mean, I won't say it is red. I don't know the color. I don't remember how the color was,
Mhm.
the laser light color, but I do remember it was at 670 nanometer, which was the
Okay.
chlorophyll absorption spectrum where the
Yeah.
absorption happens. So at that
Right.
wavelength, the light was passed down to the fruit, and it can go to a depth of 2 centimeter inside the fruit before it gets scattered or absorbed and reflected back and taken by the detector.
Right. So just as I suspected, because I used to play with electronics and that 670 is at least in the red range. I just
Yes.
double checked to make sure I wasn't wasn't imagining things. Okay, and what was the final one? So we did you did the leaf drop, or sorry, the needle drop. So preservation of food and plants post harvest, assessing it with spectroscopy, and what was the other one? There was three.
There was a document preparation on the mango post-harvest storage,
Oh, okay, and that was the storage, so that relates
on the
back to
storage
the
as
shelf life.
exactly
Okay,
shelf.
so let's move on to the questions, and what I'd like to do is try to keep these relatively tight. You can detail your answers as far as possible. I'm going to strive to speak or comment less for the most part, because that's my greatest challenge, to make these interviews more efficient. So what questions do you think we should be asking ourselves about transforming organizational culture and leadership?
Uh, I mean, leadership and organizational culture, they are going hand to hand. Definitely, some leadership hurdles, what we commonly observe, are the lack of commitment in the leadership. Say, if you really want to bring a change, you require a genuine leader who is concerned. Then the second challenge would be the ineffective communication. What I have observed is that there is lack of clear and consistent communications, which is really a essence or a requirement for a successful cultural change. So if we are not able to make our employee understand what really we want to bring a change, then we can expect less support from them. The third challenge would be the change, I would say the resistance to any change. It happens when we are trying to bring some new technology or some novel ideas. Definitely, there are some employees in the organization who may resist because they were very good in their status quo, what they were doing, and they definitely will try to create some negativity or criticism, uh, and some kind of passive aggression. So, in that way, the resistance to change can also be a challenge. And of course, the cultural change doesn't happen over one night. It requires time, and
Mm-hmm.
for that you need patience. So definitely, one has to be patient and persistent, and as and when some as and when some we meet those milestones what we had framed ahead, then we can expect some bringing some new changes into the organization culture.
Right. The thing I got out of that, and the thing that jumped out from what you just said, was the resistance to change, and there's like a neurobiological component. As far as your brain is concerned, all that matters is that you survive for the next day or the next short period of time. Since doing what you've done has kept you alive in the past, people are literally, from evolutionary biology, resistant to change, because it's like, this hasn't killed me yet. If we change it up, it might. So our brain's default is to resist change. It's not just any specific culture, it's literally part of our biology. So yeah, there's always a resistance to change. Some people just a lot more than others. So the next question is, what are the most significant challenges you face in transforming organizational culture and leadership?
Of course, resistant to change was one of the challenge. I'll give an instance. In 2016, when the government of India went for the demonetization and more towards the digital transaction. I remember that time I was working in Mumbai. Many of my officers who used to give services through acceptance of checks or draft, we try to put a barrier, because sometimes we realize that we were giving services without the money or the income going into our organization. So this was a big challenge, and I said we will go with the government move of digitalization, everything, so that we can trace back, and we can definitely see an accountability of the money going into our bank account. So in that way, uh, when I introduced, many of the employees were resistant. They tried to go with the passive aggression, and trying to bring some criticism that this is not going to work, and somehow I had to give convincing note, uh, and showed them some successful model and how it is going to ease their work in the long time, rather
Mhm.
than maintaining the records or the manuals, how it is going to ease everyone's life. And with that hope, when I gave, many of them, they tried to, I at least said, uh, at least we'll follow it and see whether if we are able to go forward or not. And if we are not able to go forward, then we can withdraw and we can go back to our old ways. But let us give a sincere try and
Mhm.
see if we are able to bring a change and easiness in our work lifestyles. So in that way, when we adopted and we could see a change, the whatever the income that was coming was going smoothly. Every transaction was digitalized. We were knowing from where it came and how it was going. So in that way, that was one of the uh, challenge which I had faced. Uh, the second one was the communication, that we need to explain them in a very clear and concise manner, with examples. In my
Mhm.
way, I generally give examples so that they get understand. Even I try to speak in their local language, if I am knowing, in their mother tongue, to make them,
Mhm.
really uh, understand what I am saying. So communication is also very important, and I prefer to keep the communication direct rather than passing through many channels. That also sometimes lead to confusion. So these are the two, basic challenges which a leader face. Of course, you know, any employee look for their well-being, for timely training. So one need to encourage also such kind of incentives through training and also trying to involve in the organizational culture in terms of diversity inclusion. So when we bring all such circumstances into our organization, we can also reduce much of the organizational challenges.
Right. And I like that too, because you're talking about, hey, this is going to make your life easier. So now you're sort of aligning with what we just talked about, the neurobiology. It's like, what is going to make my work actually easier after the initial part? And that you included the idea that, well, they need training, and that makes perfect sense. It shouldn't be, here's a change, figure it out. It should be, here's a change, here's how to do it. Otherwise, you're kind of setting them up for frustration and failure. So that's great. Okay, the next one is, could you describe a recent situation where you felt a leader could have benefited from additional training in culture building, leadership, or both?
Mm, yeah, I mean, uh, from the leader perspective, uh, we are generally, one should not be too focused on the results. while not prioritizing the employees' well-being. Uh, and if the leader is communicating in a very aggressive and demanding way, that also leads to demotivation for the team. And trust, that is also very important. So if we are not able to, develop a mutual trust, then that also is going to hamper the employees, faith, or I would say uh, employees' affiliation for the organization. So
Right.
in that aspect, as I mentioned before, we need to give proper training uh, for their well-being and to maintain a good work-life balance and to bring some effective communications. Now, this training should be going, time to time. It should not be a one-time process, but should be a never-ending process. And the leader should also take the constructive feedback. That is very important because that it has to be taken in a very constructive way, so that the leader can also evolve. And of course, as I mentioned, the value of diversity and the inclusion is very important for the successful growth of a company or an organization. And once we go with this aspect from the leader perspective, from the organization perspective, definitely we can retain the employee. Our good people can be retained so that they won't be engaged in looking for some other job. And
Mhm.
they will also have a high morale, and because the organization is taking care of their well-being. And this will also give a good creativity and innovation for the organization through the ideas, through the liberation of ideas that comes from this employee. And perhaps in the long run can also give a good organizational brand.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I see over and over again, I've seen personally, and I've seen it, through so many companies. It's sort of like, well, yes, by treating people as less than people in a sense, even if it's politely done, while they may do what's required of them to maintain their job, as they call it, quiet quitting, they can very easily go, oh, I thought of an improvement, but guess what? I'm not going to tell you about it. I found a good way to do this, but I'm not going to tell you about it because you'll raise your expectations and it would spread the efficiency to everybody else. I'm going to keep it to myself to make my job easier because I'm angry because you don't treat me well. Not to mention turnover is that I've heard it in some book. I don't remember which one it was, but something about the only thing worse than having an employee leave is having an employee who doesn't want to be there stay. And that's the kind of thing that so many companies think, shut up, get in line, do your job. What they're losing in terms of potential from those employees who, yeah, if they don't leave, they could be doing something worse. They could be staying and costing you a lot of money because they're not giving you all they could, and it's in their head. So you can't yet see or realize what you're losing. Next one is, what specific outcomes would you hope to achieve through training in leadership and culture building?
Many, Tim. One I would say would be improved understanding of leadership styles and culture models. What
Mm-hmm.
do I mean here is that the leader can be trained to identify different styles and effectiveness through which they can bring in uh, and can evolve or enhance the organizational success. Then enhanced communication and feedback. That's also one way where it helps the leaders to craft clear and concise messages, uh, and through that, we can also have the mode of getting the feedback from the employee or from the third persons, where that becomes any prominent aspect can become actionable point. Then scenario planning, that is also one way, and mitigation of any risk through SWOT analysis. Then we can also uh, enhance our knowledge management, which is through training materials on leadership,
Mm,
through culture building, uh, and uh, some case studies that can be used from elsewhere, mainly on the data driven for making any good decisions, because ultimately a leader is supposed to build a good culture, and for that some ideas where it is successfully implemented in other organization, that can be roped in for eventual good decision making for the current organization. So in a way, I would say the human leaders need to have more positive, productive, and innovative style of working.
right. Well, something that came up as you were talking about that to me loops back to what I was saying about sort of the discretionary effort, that identifying problems or opportunities for improvement or preventing problems, that is so much easier when your team is on board rather than resenting. It's like, oh, look, there's a problem. I'm just not going to tell anybody. You can't really, it's impossible to detect that because, again, this is happening for the most part in their head. And if you didn't see it with your eyes, it doesn't happen. And those are the kind of things that are happening if people are not treated well. It's like, oh, look at that. That's costing a lot of money, but it's not my money. So why should I care? Because they don't care about me. It's
Correct.
interesting that there's so many opportunities when there's goodwill between employees and their leaders, how much more money, not less money, that companies, even if they're nonprofit, will tend to make. They can be more effective. Next one is, in your opinion, what are the key skills and competencies that leaders need to create a thriving organizational culture? Before you answer this, I recognize that because of what you've already said, you might have already covered this. If you have something to add, great. If not, you can say, well, these things that I mentioned, because it's just the nature of the interview. It's impossible to anticipate whether their questions are answered before I've asked them.
Uh, So, the key skills and competencies that a leader, I already mentioned that in the previous questions, but
Mm-hmm.
some more to add on would be a strategic vision and communication and a commitment. So, what do I mean by strategic vision is a visionary thinking. We need to have a clear, inspiring direction for the organization, and we need to think how I am going to look this organization in the next 5 years. And for that, strategic planning is also required. So it's literally you're translating the vision. You're translating the vision and making the missions, or I would say the objectives. So actionable goals, and aligning them with the organization's missions and the values. Of course, effective communication, that is also very important, because unless and until your employee doesn't know what is the vision and what is the mission, uh, you cannot expect any growth or anything moving forward. The second aspect, which is a leader should evolve, is building trust and good relationship, uh, not only between the leader and the employee, but within the employee. So that could be through, I would say, uh, emotional uh, quotient or emotional intelligence, uh, EQ or SQ, social quotient also is one aspect where because humans are have feelings, have emotions. So we need to recognize that and respond according to the emotions. Empathy is also one good aspect where we see things from the perspective of others. And that also speaks about how the leader is looking at the well-being of the employee working in the organization.
Right.
Then authenticity and trust. This is also one aspect where one has to be genuine, not like you speak something in the front and do something at the back. So it has to be, it has to be sync. I would say
Mhm.
be genuine and transparent in whatever interaction you have with your employee. And a good leader should also be an active listener. That's you know, we should see that they are heard, or at least the feedback what they had given, we should reply to them, whether it is in a positive way or negative way. If it is in a negative way, we have to explain why we are not going with that particular opinion so that they also are able to understand. Then the what I feel is also empowering the employee. Empowering means kind of giving them delegation. If the leader keeps all the job in hand, it becomes a bit difficult to manage, particularly in a large organization. So you need your powers and also need to have trust. So empowering employees so that they feel that they are the owners. Okay, they are the leader for that particular work and they can make decision. Then time to time, give them coaching, mentoring, not only the but also for the emotional, for there are many train which could be categorized as technical or non-technical. So such kind of training has to go every time, or I would say frequently, so that we can realize the full potential of the employee. And as part of the communication, I already mentioned feedback and recognition is very important. With the change in the technology or circumstances, the leader also need to be agile, should be able to adapt. If there is a circumstances like COVID, then we should have our strategy or to recover back. So and a leader should also be open uh, encouraging more creativity, innovation, uh, and additionally, as mentioned previously, inclusion of diversity. The more diverse your employees are, uh, it gives a fostering culture. Uh, and everyone coming with different background definitely enrich an organization, and at the same time ethics, integrity, that also has a value, and not the least, the social responsibility. So social
Mhm.
responsibility, how my organization is going to have an impact on the society, and how best some better ways to lead to a positive contribution to the society or to my nation.
Right. Yeah. Something bigger than just the interests of the organization or the profit. I totally agree with that. So the next one is, what is the ideal duration for a comprehensive course on transforming organizational culture, leadership, or both?
Interesting. There is no duration uh, for a course on organizational culture. It depends on several factors, like the scope and the depth, where a basic, you can go with a short workshop. It could last from 1 day to 3 days, or to some, deep diving. It also depends on your target audience, how you're going to deliver, what are
Mhm.
the learning objectives. All such factors, are decisive factors for knowing the ideal duration. Uh,
Okay.
but still, from my perspective, you can go for a cultural change fundamentals, maybe for 1 to 3 days, just talking about the organizational culture, what are the assessment methods, and what are the basic strategies for change initiatives.
Mhm.
While for leadership development and for cultural change, you can go for 1 to 2 weeks, where you are going a little bit, deeper into various leadership styles. What are the communication, channels for bringing cultural transformation, and how you're going to engage the employee. So that also is very important. And then, you can go also on a comprehensive cultural transformation, which can go from weeks to months, which
Mhm.
could be taken as a multi-module program that combines all the aspects which I had mentioned, like leadership development, cultural assessment, change management methodologies, and what are the practical ways to implement. So these are the, I mean, there is no specific duration. It depends on the aspect that you have.
It's not as simple as that. The question tends to give a variety of answers. Actually, I find it really interesting. Some of them are very short, some of them are very long. But as you previously mentioned during this call, you were talking about ongoing training. To me, it should be there. It isn't like, yes, you do something once, because what often happens is, if it's a one and done kind of training, then it's sort of like, well, that was interesting or a useless waste of our time, and then nobody does it. If there's nothing ongoing, then it doesn't become really utilized. That what you're talking about is sort of the training up more than the actual application. But I like that you also separated it out and said, here's some short versions, but for something more comprehensive, it's this long. So then the next question you have probably answered, because you did talk about some of the factors. So this one is, what factors would influence the decision about that ideal duration? So whatever time frame is appropriate for the organization you're considering, right? You've looked at some of the variables. What would tend to make that duration either go up or down?
Again, Tim, it depends on several factors, like uh, learners' engagement. If we have a data, uh, kind of a historic, similar courses have been done in the past, and based on that, we can, go to frame the ideal duration. Second would be the complexity of the training material or the subject matter, which is going to, transform culture and leadership. So, uh, as I said, some deeper dives are required when you are going for leadership training. So one need to, if we are involving complex topics, then definitely the duration is also going to increase. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Third aspect could be the objectives, like if it is a short course, then, if the objective is just to give a basic awareness, then a short course would be fine. While for an in-depth skill development or implementation strategies, then I would prefer a longer duration. Uh, then it is also based on the target audience, uh, based on their experience level, based on their qualification. You know, if it is a new person, very new person, then we need to look into, foundation knowledge building. Uh,
Right.
Experienced person, the ideal duration might again go a little bit down because they are already experienced and well versed with the organization. Uh, Another factor could also be, desired outcome, uh, like how you are trying to, evolve finally. So if it is on, more, of course, this particular desired outcome is actually linked to your learning objectives. So I would say both are synced together. So if the learning objectives are more, then you can also expect more desired outcomes, and eventually the duration of the training could also prolong.
Which formats or delivery methods would be most effective for the kind of training we're talking about? Now, I want to qualify this as to the question I just asked, or one of them a few ago, which is that this is, I want you to essentially think of this as being more of the comprehensive type of course. So you have a comprehensive course on cultural transformation and leadership. As you said, they go hand in hand. They're inseparable in my mind because the leader sets so much of the tone of the culture. So which formats, given that we're talking about a comprehensive course, or delivery methods would be most effective for the kind of training that we've been talking about?
Well, the most effective training formats for transforming the organizational culture and leadership will depend on your specific goals and the audience. However, we can go with different mixed methods. I would say like interactive learning. So
Mhm.
you can hold workshops and seminars, both in person or offline, uh, or online, virtual, where we try to provide a platform for active participation,
Mhm.
discussions, group activities, role-playing exercises. So, and also scope for feedback. Uh, so such kind of aspects can be involved in the workshops and seminars. Second interactive way of learning would be case studies and simulations where the participants can grapple with the real world scenarios and see how best they can apply to bring to learn from the practical situation and 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 developing some critical thinking skills. Third, a good way of interactive learning would be in learning groups. What
Mhm.
I mean is divide into small peer group works on
Right.
some real world challenges of your own organization, and ask them to share the experience, uh, and that also, help the employee to act as a team leader. The other ways of delivering for effective training, for transforming the organizational culture would be, some knowledge transfer, like
Mhm.
e-learning modules, which you can do time to time. It should be flexible. It should foundational concept access it for any future reference.
Right.
Second way could be, going for micro learning, like short
Right.
focused lessons, like videos, quizzes, etc. And third would be, calling some guest speakers or holding some expert panels for
Mhm.
discussions from other organizations you're calling, and they're talking about they successfully transformed the culture. They are sharing their insight and also at the same time inspiring the participants.
Right.
Other aspects can be, coaching and mentoring, online communities, forums. Uh, so I would say there are many ways on how you deliver methods for bringing effective training for organizational transformation.
Right. Right. Yeah, there is. There's a ton of ways. And like you said, the variables you're coming in with might determine which ones suit you best. So the next question is, what things would determine the value of organizational culture and leadership training? Now, the last time we talked, I think I failed to communicate something because in terms of the value, we were talking about Google. It's like, oh, Google's providing training. They're rich. They should be able to do it for free. It's the flip side of this. That is, some company is providing training to Google, and Google has money and Google is going to benefit financially from this. It may not change your answer, but I just want to make sure that I've clearly communicated this, that this is some company providing training to a for-profit organization who definitely has their own financial means. And it's also useful to me because then I'll understand truly whether that answer is consistent over the last time we had this discussion. So let me restate the question with all those qualifications. What things would determine the value of organizational culture and leadership training?
Some of the key factors behind the value of organizational cultural and leadership training would be focus on the return of investment, uh,
Mhm.
and that could be employee engagement, where you you measure the change in the employee through engagement, through surveys, through turnovers, and a more positive culture can lead to a more engaged workforce,
Mhm.
potentially by reducing the cost associated with any disengagements.
Right.
Second way could be enhanced productivity and performance, where we track the change in productivity, customer satisfaction scores, relevant
Right.
performance indicators. The third, reduced recruitment and onboarding costs,
Mhm.
like a positive culture can attract and retain, leading to lower recruitment and onboarding. Then innovation and creativity is also one of the key factor. Improved employer brand. We should not ignore. That's also very important. So try to, track your employer brand reputation and how it is impacting on attracting the talent. So a strong culture, or I would say a strong work culture, can
Mhm.
make your organization more desirable place to work. This is
Right.
one aspect. Second could be, intangible, how best we are making some improved decision making,
Mhm.
how best is our and customer feedback or score on the customer feedback, then brand reputation, and how really resilient. So these are some of the aspects which one can do, and you can go through, surveys, interviews, looking at some, compare it with some other benchmark or standards which has been set by a successful industry or a company, and at the same time, doing some cost benefit analysis, etc.
Right. Well, when you're talking about baselines, the first thing that pops into my head is their own baseline makes the most sense, right? Like some of the stuff earlier you were saying to me sort of summoned or made me think about Jim Collins, especially when you're talking about vision and things like that, because I'm a big fan of his books and his ways of thinking, his business methods. But also when he did Good to Great and he compared to very similar companies in an environment, essentially he controlled as many variables as he could to make sure that the difference was down to the differences he could find. It wasn't like, oh, this was a different time, this is a different industry. He had his matched pairs, and I was always impressed with the sort of the rigorousness of that methodology. And here, that's what it made me think of, was taking some metrics or having some historical metrics which are already on the company's books and the company's records, and using those to say, okay, has retention went up? Has productivity went up according to who we are versus who we were versus who we are? So, comparing that, like literally just like your own baseline versus what happens after. And if it's significantly different, all other things being equal, then the training was very likely the causal factor. So I like that. So the next one then is, ideally, how often should this kind of training take place? So I'm talking about sort of the overall, the formal sessions, and how often those should take place to sort of optimize or maximize the training efficiency.
Well, I would say uh, like holding workshops and seminars
Mm-hmm.
on quarterly or biannually basis, where we can reinforce the key concept and also get a chance to address the current challenge. Uh,
Right.
for micro learning opportunity, could be weekly or monthly. That could
Mm-hmm.
be through short videos, quizzes, etc. And where we can connect through experienced leaders with those who want some guidance.
Right. Right. Okay. And then that sort of relates to some upcoming questions. So I want to sort of reiterate what you just said, because we cut off a little bit and I want to make sure. So you're saying the foundation would probably be some all-day intensive workshops to sort of give you that spike in knowledge, and then that's supported by weekly or monthly micro learning, and there was one other thing.
Mentorship.
Yeah, the mentorship. So the mentorship is coming from outside, or is that from inside? Is like a co-mentorship where people are mentoring each other?
It depends. Go with the inside one first.
Mm-hmm.
If I am having a very experienced, mentors within my organization, mentorship program, irrespective, based on the we can think about. But inside would be the first preference.
Right. Well, and that makes sense because you have access to it, and the cost is already covered. And clearly some people, it loops back to the diversity. Some people are good at some things. So the person who has sort of the natural aptitude or the gained skill would be a really valuable resource if they could help others, level up those specific things they're so good at. So the next one is, which types of between lesson or between session support would be most beneficial? And we may have just answered that. So
Can you repeat the question, Tim? I just
sure, sure. Okay. So this one is, I think you've already answered it from the immediately previous question. That is, which types of between session support would be most beneficial? It's between sort of the training you've described. Mainly, it sounds like it would be the intensive session. So the support that would occur off any formal training schedule.
well, the support, the facilities, what is required for a successful training, that should be available. And of course, that includes a good room, a training hall, kind of a auditorium or a chairs, the arrangement of chairs. If you want to again go into making some some sub teams while conducting the workshop or
Mhm.
training. And these are the basic, and of course, a good training materials that also is required, and a good faculty or a trainer. That is also an essence. So idealistically, this three conditions, a trainer, a good facility in terms of the place where you're going to hold the workshop, and the training material, what you're going to hand over.
Right. So I'm going to nail you down on a little bit of this. So those are the types of things that should also be available between sessions. Did you catch me?
No, I
I'll
did not.
repeat it. Yeah, we're having not as much luck with the signal today as last time. So it says which type of between session support would be most beneficial. So this is what you've mentioned, sounds like more like the official in session. So between the regular sessions, even if it includes what you just said, when what you've described, is that for the between session support also?
Uh, uh, you mean between the two training programs when
Yeah,
the
well, so between the, right, let's say the intensives, whatever it's the formal scheduled in-person or remote training that you have to be there in person or be there digitally to attend.
okay.
Somebody needs help between those sessions. Which types of between session support should be available to sort of make the best use of the whole training package?
I'm still not clear. I mean, you are asking me like if a training is ongoing, what kind of help is required or the trainee that one need to give, or
Right. Okay. Let
can
me
you give
redo this.
can you give an
Yeah.
example or something like that so that I can?
So we meet every Wednesday for a formal training session with a
Okay,
group.
okay.
But then on Thursday morning, I have a problem.
Hmm.
Which types of between session, right? It's 6 days until, so like I said, we met on Wednesday. Thursday, I experienced a problem which the training is supposed to help me with or is useful for helping solve my problem, but I can't talk to the instructor until next week. So that support, that between session support, which in the case you've referred to, may just be peer support, but which types of between formal session support would be most beneficial?
That could be, the definitely it's not a one trainee. There will be multiple. Can create a group, a
Mhm.
WhatsApp group where the problems can be discussed among the peers, and eventually, definitely one peer can answer. Now, recently I had a
Mhm.
workshop, a training for a week, and as soon as the workshop started, we created a WhatsApp group, and on day-to-day
Mhm.
basis we were communicating. So if someone had any query or problem, who was not able to understand a concept, was
Mhm.
put to the group, and the peers uh, uh, who understood the concept would provide a solution in that particular chat group.
Right.
So that's one way. Second way could be, you need to wait for another, uh, wait all your questions, uh, and and you go with all the questions what you had accumulated from
Yeah, we just lost it for a full 5 seconds. Anyway,
this.
so I'm going to reiterate what I caught and please fill in any gaps. So it sounds like mostly it would be like a peer group, masterminds, or communities, whether that's digitally remote or in person. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Great. Okay. Okay. So the next one, and this is a sub question. So we were talking about which types of support, rainbows and unicorn in a perfect world, in a perfect universe where there was no limitation of resources or availability, ideally, how often would this kind of support be available?
I should say 24/7, and that
Okay,
could be through, creating online communities and forums, or even WhatsApp group
right,
for ongoing discussions, knowledge sharing, peer coaching, and you know, action planning, goal settings, coaching, mentoring, uh, whatever is pertaining to a change in the organizational culture should be going 24/7,
right.
non-stop, because uh, it should not have a time, and it is ongoing, should be ongoing.
Mm, right. And I agree. Like the ideal time to be able to reach out for help is the moment you run into that challenge, because then there's no time wasted, struggling with it. If it's unnecessary, if there's no known answer, fair enough. But at least if somebody could make your life easy immediately, and then the problem is solved and that the appropriate action is taken immediately, it's sort of a prevention is better than cure, or at least the minimization of larger problems because things were taken care of immediately. So now the flip question is, realistically, how often would be practical and sustainable?
Mm, I think it should be practical as well as sustainable, uh, since it is open for online ongoing discussions and knowledge sharing.
Right,
However, it is based on some the budget or some time commitment. Uh,
right,
those things could be also need to be considered. Otherwise, support can be ongoing, and definitely it should be practical and sustainable.
right. Yeah, I mean, lots of the times now, given the world we live in, it's a lot easier to do that. Um, but see, it also depends. This question depends on what's been said before, because depending if it's like, oh, a lot of in-person one-to-one sessions, well, then that question's relevance is much higher. It was like, well, we can't have, one highly qualified trainer for every single for every single trainee. So it depends on what's come before. So the next one then is, how do you envision the kind of training we're talking about helping leaders address specific cultural and leadership challenges within an organization?
Well, as I said, training is a powerful tool for the leaders to address structural and leadership challenges within an organization. And some differences what a training can make is understanding the culture, assess what is their current culture, identify the strengths, the weakness, and also help them to define what is the desired future state that they are looking for.
Mhm.
Second could be the leadership styles and communications, where the leader can learn about different leadership styles, how they adapt their approach to different situations and the team dynamics. Training also can enhance the communication skills for clear, concise, and some messages.
Right,
And also an evolve changed or change in management strategies, where their leader is strategize for navigating change initiatives or managing resistance or bringing, or fostering employee relationship. Uh, training can also help in in developing some specific skills like conflict resolution, where a good leader can uh, mediate, uh, you know, to to uh, to mitigate any conflict, and also at the same time open communication channel, and bring in a foster a culture for collaborations. As said before, diversity and inclusion can also be a part. Employee engaged performance management uh, through providing some uh, effective feedback, or coaching, or holding the employee accountable, could be building self-awareness, which could be through emotional intelligence, or through case studies and simulation. They're experienced with the real world scenarios. Uh, and it can also help in through networking and support, mainly through the peer learning, uh, through coaching and mentoring. So in nutshell, training can empower the leaders to take the ownership of the culture, and they become active change agents, setting the tone and leading by example.
Right.
And at the same time, it can also equip leaders with the skills and knowledge to address specific challenges and navigate any cultural shift effectively.
Right. Actually, I think something that came up for me during what you were saying was I find it interesting that oftentimes, and I've had experiences of this on my own recently, was it's like, okay, we're only positive here. It was like, yeah, but when there's a real problem, you can't refuse to hear about bad news or refuse to hear about a problem and pretend it's all sunshine and rainbows. It's like, well, I don't have enough time to prepare effectively for X. It was like, oh, well, I'd like you to do this anyway. That is, or what was it? I see, I'd like you to do that anyway, which translates to me, and maybe I'm negative, but I don't think so. I don't care, do this instead. I don't care if I'm helping you set up to fail, versus you could say, I see. Yeah, I get what you're saying, like some acknowledgement of something, but also when there's a problem, not ignoring it and pretending it isn't there, because identifying a problem is one of the main things to a solution. Ignoring the problem is the perpetuation or continuation of the problem. So it's not all about warm and fuzzy. You got to have the psychological safety to say, well, what you're proposing isn't going to work because of this. And then looking at a solution, certainly not ignoring the fact that problems are real, and you're better to actually honestly discuss them. So that's something that came out for me when you said that. So let's see here. Next one is considering the potential impact. If the training we've been discussing were a course, what pricing model would you find most appealing to your clients? That is, you're providing this training, or it's not for you, but it's either for your clients or your reports. What kind of pricing model would be most appropriate and appealing to you as the provider or the administrator of this?
Well, since I work in a Government of India organization, so our not like we derive training. Largely, most of our training is for the society, because we want to uplift, want to transform
Right.
the society in a better way.
Mm-hmm.
If at all it is priced, it will be only to meet organizational expenses. Other than that, or food expenses. Other
Right.
than uh, have a price or an income from any other any of our training. However, to answer your question, we can go based on the value-based pricing,
Mm-hmm.
look uh, what impact your clients are more interested, and based on that, you know, uh, focus on the potential return of investment, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and how it is going to, you know, this training is going to help more
Right.
employee engagement, more productivity, and at the same time, reduced cost cutting to the company. Uh,
Right.
so otherwise, you can also think about the subscription model, for uh, some training materials or updates, or resources, uh, and sometimes it can also be based on the outcome-based pricing, which
Mm-hmm.
can, you tie a portion of your fees to achieve some specific metrics
Right.
related to some cultural improvement, or you align and incentivize while delivering any successful trainings, and something where you are looking based on the outcome.
Right. Well, I'm a big fan of that. What I would phrase as performance-based pricing is sort of like, though people tend to actually be, in my experience, and when I've talked to different people who do this kind of work, it's like a lot of clients are resistant to it. It's like, look, what I'm saying is, if I don't give you what you've been promised, I get nothing. But if it exceeds your expectations based on some metrics, some criteria that we mutually agreed upon, if we do twice as well as we thought we could, then you pay us twice as much. And I think that's really important. But like I said, it's interesting because people is like, well, I don't want to give you more found money that we don't have. So in this case, I'm talking about increasing profits or something where it can be measured directly or indirectly in dollars. And it's sort of like, well, if we make 30% more money, we don't want to give you 3% or 10% of that 30%. It's like, yeah, but you don't have it. So it's not like we're dipping into your savings or your budget. It only exists and we only get paid if you win, we win. It's a great deal. But it's hard to do the performance-based pricing because it's hard to get past people's sort of traditional view of what would make sense. So it's like, you pay me X amount, and you're, as long as we provide the training, it's all on you whether you pass or fail, versus we either both succeed or neither of us succeed. Seems to me to be a pretty good incentive for a training provider to do the best possible job they could. So I really like that performance-based pricing concept. So now I'm going to flip this a little bit. So now, if you were the client or recipient of this training, so it isn't, I know this is sort of abstract for you because you work with a government organization. So let's say you were a CEO, or you were personally receiving training for your own goals and you were paying for it. Under those conditions, rather than being the organizational decision maker, or the provider of the training to other clients, this is your money going into it. This is your organization's money going into it. What kind of pricing model would you prefer under those conditions?
Mm, I'll go for per person pricing.
For what?
Per person pricing.
Per person. Okay.
So, I mean, that's more simple and straightforward. You
Right.
will only pay for what is required, and this also is appealing uh, when you're having some limited budget
Right.
or team.
Right.
Then some other consideration also, as if I am a client or a recipient, I would also seek for some financial assistance uh,
Mm-hmm.
or some uh, payment plans, or you know uh, to make the training more accessible, uh,
Mm-hmm.
or if there is some free trial or pilot program, a kind
Right.
of a view where the client also get a chance to experience the
Right.
training firsthand before you know committing for a full program.
Right. So like a freemium, whether it's a free month or something, to say, let me try this. Because I mean, that's really sort of what if I understand you correctly, it was like, well, it all sounds good in the sales literature, or your pitch was great, but let me actually experience it to decide whether I would put any money into it. That's what the freemium model is effectively, right? When you get a free month of some kind of software. Same kind of idea. Is that what you would prefer?
Mm, Maybe, I mean, that's post training.
Hmm.
Pre-training, it's just like a movie trailer. Before the launch of a movie, you have a trailer.
Right.
Uh, so it's more like that. So once I look into the trailer and I see, it is exciting, worth to watch, worth to
Mm-hmm.
try, based on that 1 or 2 minute, snapshot,
Right.
then definitely I would be going to watch that movie. So it's more or less similar in the same manner for the training program. So if it is going to meet my expectations, or some snapshots, how it is going to get being delivered, whether some, even those who have taken such courses, their feedbacks, all it
Right.
matters. And
Right.
eventually that will lead me to go for a successful, full-fledged training program.
Right. It makes me think the thing that came up in my brain when you were saying that was I was thinking about James Cameron's Avatar 2 and the fact
Uh,
that it took him like 13 years to get to it and that it basically kind of sucked. I was really disappointed. It was like, this is going to be amazing because the first one was so good. And it was like, he just basically told the story in the water instead of in the forest. But fundamentally, very little had changed. He didn't introduce anything unique. It was sort of
mhm,
like, yeah, you might be James Cameron, but that's even more reason why it should have been really good. And it was, to me, I pretty much would have asked for my money back. After the fact, it was like, that was just the same story again. And he had 13 years to make it fantastic. Yeah,
mhm,
no, no. So sometimes the movie trailer model doesn't always work. And then you start talking about, can people get their money back if they're not satisfied with the results, which loops back to the performance-based pricing. So let's move on to the next one, and that is, what questions, if any, do you have about the topics we've talked about? That is, what questions that are, again, if any, are outstanding in your mind that you've never found the answers? Like, I wish somebody knew or somebody could tell me XYZ. So I'm asking, do you have any questions about leadership and culture building which you haven't found a satisfying answer for?
mhm. Well, mm, maybe like, is there a potential to use uh, to identify some patterns or trends, how culture and leadership training program can impact the organization performance
Hmm.
across different industries and different contexts? I mean, this could be a large scale analysis
Yeah,
to
for sure.
understand the training impact. Mhm.
Right. So I'm going to sort of restate that into more specific open-ended questions like how could we identify patterns from cultural and leadership training and what impact they have?
Exactly.
Okay, great.
I mean,
Okay,
multi-sector, not only one sector, but different industries.
right. Yeah, for sure. And like you said, that's not that's not the kind of question that can be answered easily. Like you said, that's a research project for sure. Okay, so almost finished here. Next one is uh ooh, I split the last one I last asked you into three, but the first one may answer all three. So how could I make this interview better?
Well, it's better, but still, of course, it was very generic. We can
Mhm,
focus on some specific topic or an angle. I
mhm,
mean, within the culture, because that's very broad and
mhm.
that can be aligned with my expertise. Mm, uh, then, second, I think would be some clarity in the questions by giving some examples
Mhm.
where I can understand, better and try to relate with my past experiences.
Right,
Uh,
right,
so that could be one way. And yeah, I think these are some of the ways for to make this interview more better. And of
right,
course, research on your guest. Of course, you asked the question about my postdoc. Maybe you might be knowing better, but just for the sake of the viewers who
right,
are going to your channel and looking at my expertise to understand, because many viewers who are coming from science field, non-science field, there are many fields. So in that way, uh, I can understand why you asked that particular question.
right.
Other than that, I think looks all good.
Thank you. So yeah, it is always like the questions are the most challenging thing is to balance sort of precision and simplicity in asking a question that I think is going to be educational and engaging for everybody, the audience and myself. So now this is just a refinement on what you just said. So specifically now for different groups, how could I make this interview better for our audience? That is to make it a better experience for everybody who is going to be watching this interview or future interviews.
Where adding value to your audience, you can focus on actionable takeaways from this interview, where the
Right,
audience can gain some practical insights by asking the questions that will provide them some concrete strategies
right,
uh, what they can implement. Uh, then you can also incorporate the audience question. Uh, uh, if at all it is there, that can be incorporated beforehand or from the past interviews. What any audience has given a comment that can be taken and can be posed to a successful or a successive interviewee. Uh,
right. Yeah,
so that can also be taken, and I think that's it. I mean, from my perspective, the two
right,
uh, main aspect that can add value for the audience.
right. Well, I mean, and that can even be done sort of on the posting side. I really like that idea. First of all, the actionable takeaways, I'm all about that myself. It's like nice theory. How can a person who listens to this actually use this in the real world? It's a bit of my pet peeve when it's too vague or it's sort of like, well, it was interesting, but I don't know how to apply it. If it's not applicable in my own personal opinion, it's largely useless. So it has to be applicable. I really like your idea of getting the audience to ask questions or inquire. And that could be done through the post. It was like, here's this thing, here's this question, here's the answer. What do you think? How could you apply this and get an engagement that gets both sides of that? How would you apply this, or how do you think this could be applied? And then flipping it back the other way and going, here's how I see this could be made into an actionable strategy. So thank you. And thank you again for spending time with me, Dr. Sanu Jacob.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Bye.